Hello everyone, Storm101 here. Today we'll be having an update on multiple severe weather setups across parts of the upper Midwest. There's also going to be some severe weather across parts of western Texas, even in parts of southwestern Oklahoma later today. Before we get started this video, if you guys like weather related content, you can subscribe to my channel. We do stuff here all the time on this channel. Plus, we'll have more updates on a couple of these severe weather setups over the next couple of days. So definitely stay tuned for more updates as well. We're going to start with the watch warning advisory display. Generally mostly quiet across the country, at least for the time being. Anyway, we got fire weather problems across parts of the four quarter states and some of the surrounding areas as well. That's not the that's not the only areas that has red flag warnings. We even have red flag warnings in the parts of the New England states. There's actually a critical risk for fire weather for parts of the New England states. So even areas up there, it's recommended not to burn anything up there later today, but really for the rest of the country, it's generally mostly quiet. Here's the storm reports from yesterday. Yesterday, you had two waves of severe weather. You had one in the early morning hours across parts of Minnesota and parts of northern Wisconsin. Most of it was hail, and then the second round came in the southeastern part of Minnesota into western Wisconsin. That brought in a high risk for damage winds. Even a couple tornadoes were reported as well. There's been a total of 4 tornado reports. One of those was actually in Florida. There was a water spout in the southern part of Florida, which is pretty interesting. 14 wind reports, one of those were significant, and 63 hail reports. 12 of those were significant as well. So, yeah, yesterday was certainly an active day for portions of Minnesota and Wisconsin. And some of those areas could experience more severe weather later today. There's two areas we're watching here. The first area will be in parts of western Texas into southwestern Oklahoma. That's where we have an enhanced risk for some of those areas. And we're going to make this simple real quick, just like yesterday. In parts of western Texas and southwestern Oklahoma, we're going to have a lot of instability in place, and that's going to lead to the threat for some hail. As you can see here, there's a 50%, and there's even a hatched area out there as well. So some of those hailstones could be very large. But the main threat is actually going to be damage to wind. Some of these storms may try to cluster up a little bit, and that can help increase the damage to wind threat. And some of those damage winds could be significant. Them downdraft K values will be quite elevated. However, when it comes to tornado risk, it's pretty much slim to none. Really, the main reason why the tornado risk is so limited. Two things. One of those is that wind shear values are going to be quite weak, especially sort of relative felicity values are going to be on the lower end side. Number two, these storm bases are going to be way up there. The LCO height is just going to be way up there. So it'd be quite amazing to see a tornado out there with such a high thunderstorm base, which I think I've heard that storm bases could be up as high as 1,000 feet. So they are going to be way, way up there. So that's also going to limit the tornado risk overall. But if you go into parts of Wisconsin, there's actually a 5% tornado risk. That's actually we'll see better wind shear values that, than in the parts of Texas out there. Damage winds will be possible up there, even some hail. It's also hatched as well up there. And the potential is there we could see a mesoscale convective system in some of those areas in there. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Then on day two, which is tomorrow, we've got two slight risk areas. There's one for parts of the Midwest, and there's another one for parts of eastern New Mexico in western Texas. Here's your tornado probabilities. The greatest threat for tornadoes is going to be in the southeastern part of South Dakota, southwestern Minnesota, northwestern Iowa, and northeastern Nebraska. That's where we're going to see some pretty elevated wind shear values. Combine that with a lot of instability that's going to be in place. That's going to bring an elevated risk for tornadoes, which there is a 5% risk area up there. Damage winds will be the main threat. Hail will be a possibility. Some of it could be very large out there as well. Instability values will likely be pretty elevated for some areas. That goes the same situation for parts of eastern New Mexico and western Texas, which we won't talk about that area for today, on day two anyway. Day three, which is Thursday, we got a large enhanced risk for portions of the eastern Dakotas, northeastern Nebraska, northwestern Iowa, and most of Minnesota. They've really expanded the enhanced risk out there. Was there is a hatched area out there. So really, the main threats would be damaged winds, large hail. Some of it could be very large, and even tornadoes will be a possibility out there as well. And the 4 to 8 day outlook, there's nothing on there for the time being. Let's get started with today's severe weather risk, and we're actually going to start by looking to actually, let's get started by looking to reflectivity. It makes a little bit more sense. So as we get later today, we should start to see some thunderstorms to develop in the parts of Central and southern Wisconsin here. Even a couple of storms up in the parts of upper Michigan. You can see there, it's got a couple rogue cells up there. Now, what's interesting with the hairball is that it really doesn't become into an organized cluster. I think part of the reason is the fact that wind shear values will not be very elevated, and that may help prevent the risk for any organized cluster thunderstorms. Now, I will say that models do not handle Mexico convective systems very well, so you could take it as a grain of salt here. But regardless here, I think thunderstorms will develop here, and I think we are going to see a cluster of thunderstorms, but how long it lasts is something we really do not know. I think we will likely see an organized cluster of thunderstorms, at least for the southeastern part of Wisconsin, and maybe in the parts of northeastern Illinois. And I think after that, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty out there. It's going to be one of those situations where it could be a boom or bust. The boom would be that you get quite a bit of wind shear, maybe more than expected, and it can last for a long period of time. Like if I show you guys the European model, which, like I mentioned yesterday, the European model's been very consistent, it still shows that potential. There it is about around peak time heating. We got cluster thunderstorms in several Wisconsin. As you get in the overnight hours, like how far it lasts throughout the overnight hours. Really by Wednesday morning, the cluster thunderstorms is still there. It's all the way down into southern Missouri. Now, I don't think it's going to last that long, if I'm going to be honest with you. But you never know. Mexico convective systems can be quite unpredictable out there. So we do need to pay attention how the environment goes very closely today, because regardless if there's not going to be much wind shear or not, there's going to be a lot of instability out there. Which, if I show you guys those instability values from the HER model, this is 2Z here. And your cluster thunderstorms at around this point here might be somewhere over in here. And check out these instability values. They're generally about 3 to 4,000 joules per kilogram. If you go about around peak time heating, 4,000 plus becomes a little bit more common, especially as you get farther back to the west out there, which there are some isolated spots of up to 5,000 joules per kilogram. And you can see here, even getting to the overnight hours, like by in the early morning hours on Wednesday, there's still a lot of instability left out there. So some of these storms could easily continue in overnight hours. But then again, that all depends on how much wind shear is left. There will be a little bit more uncertainty on the eastern side of the risk area because those instability values will be quite low. And another thing is that sign in values are going to be quite elevated. So it'd be hard to have a cluster of thunderstorms out here than it would be out here, because out here there are some spots where the sign in is a little bit weaker. So that's another thing to watch for too. And significant torque parameters from the hardball, this is 21Z. You can see here numbers are not very elevated out there. I'll say it's generally a 1 to 2. But this is in central Wisconsin, and you can see here pretty decent sounding overall. You got a decent hodograph here. Wind shear values are not bad either. Sorry to Felicity values, generally 100 to about 262. That's not bad. And instability values is going to be quite elevated regardless. Surface base is 4600. Meanwhile, the mixed layer cape is 3300. And downdraft cape is quite elevated, 1200. It's quite on the higher end. And lap rates will also be quite supportive. So really, given my sounding here, conditions will be favorable for damaging winds, large hail, and I think the tornado risk is going to stay pretty limited um, in this area in here. But the potential for tornadoes will be there regardless here, but I don't think it's going to be a very high risk or anything like that. You can see here how specific tornado parameter values do continue to stay elevated across parts of Wisconsin and potentially into parts of northern Illinois as well, so you get deeper into the overnight hours as well. But the farther west you go here, a lot of the stuff here is capped. really the main area of focus here will be in this area here. So if you do live in parts of central or southern Wisconsin, even in parts of northern Illinois, definitely keep an eye on the forecast. Or radar as the day goes on today, because it'll be interesting to watch and see what it kind of happens here today. It's kind of, then again, one of those boom or bust scenarios. The boom potential will be like the European model was showing, a big organized cluster developing in central Wisconsin and lasting all the way into parts of Missouri by Wednesday morning. And the bust scenario is the HER model. It just doesn't really get organized and it kind of falls apart. So then again, a lot of uncertainty here is out there for later today, but it'll be interesting to watch and see what happens. Then the focus is back to the west here. If we go to Wednesday, and really the main area of focus would be in portions of eastern South Dakota, southwestern Minnesota, northwestern Iowa, into northeastern Nebraska. That's where we had that 5% tornado risk out there. It's a slight risk for now, but if models trend towards the HER model, which you can see there's a lot of storms out there, and a lot of these storms can actually become big hailstorms too. I mean, there could be some pretty impressive hail course for some of these here. If this were to be upgraded to enhanced risk, I think it's going to be mainly for hail. Maybe even the tornado risk too could get upgraded to enhanced risk territory as well. Because I'm going to show you guys the environment here, actually right about now. This is the significant tornado parameters, and there are some significant numbers out there, but it's kind of over in an isolated area here. But even in an isolated area, some thunderstorms do form in that environment. If we get a sounding out there, check this out. This is one crazy sounding here. Now, I think it's a little over our top, if I'm going to be honest with you, with the instability and even the 2-point value too. I think it's a little over our top here, but kind of paying closer attention to the wind shear, which I think it's going to be more accurate. Wind shear values will be elevated for severe weather. Storm velocity is between 200 to 300, which would be favorable for tornadoes. But the instability is going to be quite elevated. And then again, it's generally in an isolated area. I mean, that's a surface-based Cape value of 6,700. That is in the extreme side of instability. That is extremely high. Mixed layer Cape is 3,400. Downdraft Cape is 1,400. That'd be favorable for some significant damage and winds. And lap rates, middle of lap rates is on the strong side too. So really, especially if the wind shear values were to trend a little bit weaker, we could see some big time hailstorms out there. So yeah, and I think that's going to be the primary concern for Wednesday severe weather potential is going to be the large hail threat. That's the one I would be more concerned about than anything else because some of those hailstones could be quite significant out there as well. You also do notice here it's got another area of some significant tornado parameter values in a parts of southeastern Minnesota, which if you do check out reflectivity, there are some storms that do form the environment here, but will they get organized? That'd be one of the bigger questions. Which you can see here with the sounding here, I think it's mostly going to be favorable for large hail, damage and winds. Even tornadoes will be a possibility as well. But then again, it all depends on if those storms can get pretty organized too. Because if you look on reflectivity, some storms do not look to be very organized, but all of them do have a pretty decent hail core though. So they could produce some hail. So Wednesday is definitely a day to really pay attention to very closely too, because there could be some nasty storms out there, especially in the eastern part of South Dakota and the parts of southwestern Minnesota, even the parts of northwestern Iowa and northeast Nebraska. This will be the area I will definitely keep an eye on for tomorrow, because if the HER model is correct, I mean that's quite a pretty good environment there for all modes of severe weather. And really, by Thursday, the risk area gets larger. This is when your next system kind of comes in. For Thursday, and these are your superset composite values from the NAM, and there are some elevated superset composite parameters out there. Uh, you can see here as high as a 17 out there. That's quite elevated, but if you look in the larger picture here, there's widespread values of 4 to about an 8. So and let's check out some of the soundings here. If we go into southwest central Minnesota here, this is going to be such a large area here to watch for severe weather. Luckily, in this sounding here, it is actually capped, and this could be one of the uncertainties here or limiting factors. So you got a lot of dry air in the mid levels, even down to the low levels too, has quite a bit of dry air to work with. But more importantly, you got a cap in place. So at least you won't have supercells blowing up across most of the warm sector here, which would be a good thing here. Which a better way to look at that is the surface space cape with the sign in. Higher the sign in values here indicates the potential for a strong cap. But there are areas that does not have a cap here. And one of those areas is across parts of eastern Nebraska and eastern South Dakota. There's even another area in the parts of northern Wisconsin too, where there's not much to sign in out there either. So at least the entire warm sector here, we won't see supercells out there because of those very elevated sign-in values, which does lead to a stronger cap. But then again, there's still areas out there that does not have a cap here. So if you do get sounding here, kind of closer to the frontier in eastern South Dakota, and see what the NAML suggests, and you can see here on the sounding here, there's no cap in place. Windshield values are not too bad. About generally 200 to 250 range. That's pretty good. That's favorable for tornadoes. But really, the instability values in the lap range really catch my attention here because conditions with surface based cape with 4700 and mixed layer cape is 4300. That's quite impressive for mixed layer cape. This will be favorable conditions for some significant hail. And I think that's going to be the biggest concerns on most of these days here. It's going to be the large hail potential. Damage and winds will be a possibility too. Downdraft cape is up to almost to 1600. That's quite high. If the cluster thunderstorms would roll into downdraft cape up to 1600, you could be talking about significant damage and winds with downdraft cape values like that. Even with level lap rates support that too. So really overall by the sounding here, conditions will be favorable for all hazards. That includes significant damage to winds, significant hail, and the potential there is for tornadoes. Doesn't look like a strong tornado sounding to me because of those lower story to felicity values, but that could potentially change. So it's definitely something to really watch for. Let's check out something I haven't really shown much on the channel here. That's the hodograph map, and it's these little lines here. This counts as a hodograph, and anytime you got a big curve like this is supportive for tornadoes. And larger the curve there, sometimes these larger curves indicate the potential for strong tornadoes. And you can see here, check out all of these curves here. Throughout the entire warm sector is full of these large curves on these photographs, which then again indicates the potential for tornadoes out there. Now, luckily, like we saw here on the surface space cape of sign in, a lot of the stuff out here is capped. But there are areas that are not capped. Like if I remember from whenever we looked at the sign in map, these areas out here are uncapped, and this area here is also uncapped as well. Meanwhile, everywhere else is capped. So it makes it look a little bit better here. But keep in mind here, a lot of the stuff here will be moving to the east here as you get into the overnight hours as well. So given by this time period, which at this point in time here, this is 0Z, areas further to the east here still need to keep an eye on these storms back to the west as well, because we're likely going to see thunderstorms develop near that cold front as well, where things are going to be uncapped out there as well. This is one of the reasons why I do not show significant parameter values on College New page, because some of the colors are missing. So it makes it harder to see. But you can see here, there are some very elevated significant parameter values. That's an 8.9 that was on there. And then again, over a 1, conditions could be favorable for tornadoes, but if it's over a 2, conditions could be favorable for strong tornadoes. And you can see there are some elevated numbers out there. There's even another area of some elevated numbers in northern Wisconsin, even into upper Michigan as well. But I think the main area to watch here for Thursday will be these areas right in here. That'd be the area I'll be most concerned about, because then again, you got those very elevated instability values. They're quite high for this time of year, especially this far north. And wind shear values would be good as well. They'd be favorable for severe weather. So we definitely need to pay attention to Thursday very closely as well. And it could be another very active day for parts of the Dakotas and the parts of Minnesota on Thursday. But Anyways, guys, that's all for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like this video, hit that like button. If you like my channel, hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell notifications so you never miss an upload. If you guys have questions about this, put in the comment section down below. Alright, you guys questions. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.